Stop. You can't do this. Sarah's voice cracked with fury as she stood defiantly on her front lawn, hands planted on her hips, her eyes locked on the HOA officer, the man clad in a crisp navy polo with Sunnyvale Estates, HOA embroidered. In gold, clutched a clipboard like a shield. He pointed at her vibrant flower gardenia. Cheerful explosion of marigolds, zinnias, and daisies and, sneered. These flowers violate Section 3.2 of the HOA guidelines. They're too colorful. You've got 48 hours to remove them or you're looking at a $500 fine. Sarah's jaw dropped, her heart pounding. Too colorful. Her garden, her pride, and joy, the one she'd spent months nurturing, was now a target. This wasn't just about flowers, it was about control, about someone dictating what she could do in her own home. Across America, homeowners like Sarah are drawing battle lines, fighting back against homeowners associations, HOAs that have morphed from neighborhood watchdogs into petty tyrants. This is the story of one community's rebellion, a tale of defiance, unity, the fight to reclaim the freedom to make a house a home. Sarah Thompson had moved to Sunnyvale Estates 3 years ago, chasing the suburban dream. The neighborhood, tucked in a quiet corner of suburban Ohio, is picture perfect. Rows of charming 2-story homes, neatly trimmed hedges, and kids riding bikes down wide, tree-lined streets. She'd fallen in love with her cozy craftsman-style house, its wraparound porch begging for lazy summer evenings. As a graphic designer who worked from home, Sarah saw her garden as an extension of her creativity, a canvas of color that greeted her every morning. She'd spent countless weekends digging in the dirt, planting seeds, and coaxing life from the soil. Her marigolds glowed like tiny suns, and her zinnias danced in the breeze. To her, they weren't just plants. They were a symbol of the life she was building. But the Sunnyvale Estates HOA had other ideas. Led by Karen Mitchell, a self-appointed guardian of community standards, the HOA enforced rules with an iron grip. Karen, a former corporate lawyer with a penchant for power, had turned the neighborhood into her personal fiefdom. The HOA's 50-page rulebook dictated everything. The exact shade of mulch allowed dark brown. Never read. The precise height of grass no more than 3.5 inches. Even the acceptable breeds of dogs, no pit bulls, no matter how sweet, violators. Faced fines that could spiral into thousands, and in extreme cases, liens on their homes. Sarah had heard the horror stories of neighbors fined for leaving a basketball hoop up overnight, or for painting their front door a shade too bold, but she'd never imagined her garden would become a battleground. That morning, as the HOA officer scribbled her violation notice, Sarah's shock turned to rage. She'd followed every rule when she moved in, paying her $300 annual HOA dues and keeping her lawn pristine. She'd even attended the mind-numbing HOA meetings, where Karen lectured about upholding property values while residents fidgeted in folding chairs. But this? Declaring her flowers too colorful? It was absurd, a power trip dressed up as policy. The officer handed her the notice, his smirk practically daring her to fight back. "You can appeal at the next meeting," he said, already turning to leave, but I wouldn't bother. Karen always gets her way. Sarah stood frozen. The paper crumpled in her hand. Her mind raced back to the whispers she'd heard from neighbors' stories of Karen's vendettas, of fines piling up until families were forced to sell their homes. There was Maria, the single mom next door, who'd been slapped with a $200 fine for leaving her son's tricycle in the driveway. Or Mr. Jenkins, the elderly widower across the street, who'd been ordered to dismantle his beloved rose trellis because it disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. Sarah had always thought she could stay under the radar, keep her head down, and avoid trouble. But now trouble had found her. As the officer's car pulled away. Sarah's neighbor, Tom, poked his head over the fence. A burly mechanic with a quick laugh. Tom had his own run-ins with the HOA, most recently, a $400 fine for parking his work truck in his driveway overnight. "They got you too, huh?" he said, shaking his head. "Karen's on a rampage." "Yesterday. She told me my mailbox was too rustic." "What does that even mean?" Sarah laughed bitterly, holding up her violation notice. Apparently, my flowers are a threat to civilization. Tom's eyes narrowed. This has to stop. We're not serfs, and this isn't her kingdom. Asterisk that night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, the violation notice, glaring at her under the soft glow of a lamp. She thought about her garden, about the hours she'd spent planting it, about the joy it brought her, and the neighbors who stopped to admire it. She thought about Maria struggling to pay fines on a single mom's budget, and Mr. Jenkins, who'd lost his wife and clung to his roses like a lifeline. The HOA wasn't just nitpicking, it was stripping people of their dignity, their individuality, their right to call their homes their own. Sarah's anger crystallized into resolve. Wasn't going to rip out her flowers. She wasn't going to bow to Karen's whims. Instead, she was going to fight. Asterisk the next morning, Sarah knocked on Maria's door. Over coffee, she shared her plan. A neighborhood rebellion. We can't let them bully us anymore, Sarah said, her voice steady. If we stand together, they can't ignore us. Maria hesitated, her eyes tired from long shifts at the hospital, but then she nodded. I'm in. For my son, for our home. By noon, Sarah had roped in Tom, Mr. Jenkins, and half a dozen other neighbors. They gathered in her living room, a motley crew of feed-up homeowners, swapping stories of HOA overreach. There was Lisa fined for hanging a wind chime. Raj, who'd been told his solar panels were too shiny. And Emma, a young teacher who'd been ordered to remove her Black Lives Matter sign because it was political. Asterisk as the group talked, Sarah felt a spark ignite. This wasn't just about her garden, it was about every homeowner who'd been pushed around by Karen's HOA. She proposed a plan. They'd research the HOA's own rules, find its weaknesses, and expose its overreach. They'd use social media to rally support, posting their stories on X under a hashtag she'd already thought up. Hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels. And they'd stage a bold, public act of defiance, a neighborhood-wide protest that would show Karen and her minions they weren't invincible. Asterisk. The room buzzed with nervous excitement. Mr. Jenkins, his voice soft but firm, said, I've lived here 30 years. No one's taking my roses without a fight. Tom slammed his fist on the table. Let's give him hell. Sarah smiled, her heart racing. This was the start of something big, a revolution in Sunnyvale Estates, where ordinary people would take back their homes one marigold at a time. The Sunnyvale Estates HOA had transformed a once welcoming community into a pressure cooker of resentment and fear. What began as a well-intentioned group to maintain property values had morphed into a bureaucratic nightmare. With Karen Mitchell as its unchallenged dictator. Karen, with her impeccably styled hair and a wardrobe of pastel cardigans, was a master of passive-aggressive control. Her emails sent daily to the neighborhood listserv were laced with phrases like, for the good of our community and maintaining our prestigious aesthetic. But behind the polite veneer was a ruthless enforcer who thrived on power. Her army of volunteers, retirees, and busybodies with too much time on their hands patrolled the streets like hawks, armed with measuring tapes, cameras, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the HOA's 50-page rulebook. They documented infractions with glee, snapping photos of non-compliant trash cans or grass blades a half-inch too tall. Asterisk. The rules themselves were a labyrinth of absurdity. The HOA dictated the exact shade of exterior paint, only 3 approved beiges, the type of mailbox brushed aluminum, no exceptions. And even the placement of welcome mats centered, never askew. One resident, Lisa, was fined $150 for hanging a wind chime deemed too melodic. Another Raj faced a $600 penalty because his solar panels were excessively reflective. The fines weren't just petty, they were crippling. For Maria, the single mom next door, a $200 fine for her son's tricycle left in the driveway meant skipping groceries for a week. For Tom, the mechanic, a $1,000 fine for his dog barking 3 times past 9 p.m. forced him to dip into his savings. And for Mr. Jenkins, the elderly widower, the order to remove his rose trellis, a gift from his late wife, was a gut punch that left him sleepless, staring at the empty space where it once stood. Asterisk Karen's reign wasn't just about rules. It was personal. She seemed to relish targeting those who couldn't fight back. Maria, working double shifts as a nurse, was an easy mark, too exhausted to attend HOA meetings and challenge the fines piling up against her. When she missed a payment, Karen sent a letter threatening a lien on her home, a move that could have forced Maria and her son out. Tom, outspoken and unafraid to call Karen out, became a frequent target, with violations appearing almost weekly. "It's like she's punishing me for existing," he told Sarah, his voice thick with frustration. Even Emma, a young teacher who'd moved in hoping for a fresh start, was ordered to remove a Black Lives Matter sign from her window because it was political and divisive. The rulebook didn't explicitly ban signs, but Karen's interpretation was law. Asterisk, the HOA's power came from its ability to enforce fines without oversight. The bylaws written decades ago were vague enough to give Karen free rein. Appeals were heard by a board handpicked by Karen herself, ensuring no one could win. Most residents couldn't afford lawyers to challenge the HOA in court, and those who tried were buried in legal fees. The result was a neighborhood on edge, where every decision, planting a flower, hanging a holiday wreath, or leaving a bike outside, carried the risk of a fine. Neighbors stopped chatting over fences, wary of who might report them. Kids played indoors to avoid attracting attention. The sense of community that had drawn Sarah to Sunnyvale was gone, replaced by a chilling silence. Asterisk, but the stories of Overreach kept spreading. At a local coffee shop, Sarah overheard two neighbors whispering about a family forced to sell their home after $5,000 in fines for an unapproved shed. On X, she found threads from other neighborhoods where HOAs banned everything from basketball hoops to American flags. The problem wasn't unique to Sunnyvale. It was a nationwide epidemic of HOA overreach. Sarah realized this wasn't just about her flowers or Maria's tricycle. It was about a system that let petty tyrants like Karen weaponize vague rules to control people's lives. As she sat in her kitchen, staring at her violation notice, Sarah knew she couldn't stay silent. She began texting neighbors, starting with Maria and Tom, proposing a meeting to fight back. The HOA had ruled by fear for too long. It was time to remind Karen that this was their neighborhood, not hers. On a humid July evening, Sarah's garage was a furnace of rebellion. 20 neighbors squeezed in, their whispers charged with frustration and hope. The air smelled of coffee and determination as folding chairs creaked under the weight of people. Fed up with the HOA's tyranny, Maria, her eyes tired from hospital shifts, clutched a mug and recounted how a $200 fine for her son's tricycle had forced her to skip bills. "I'm one fine away from losing my home," she said, her voice breaking. Tom, his work boots still dusty from the garage, slammed a fist on a workbench. "Karen made me repaint my shed twice because it wasn't the right shade of taupe. It cost me $800. Even Mr. Jenkins, usually reserved, spoke up, his voice soft but steely. "I've lived here 30 years. My wife planted those roses. No one's taking them." Asterisk, Sarah stood at the front, her violation notice pinned to a corkboard like a battle flag. As a graphic designer, she knew how to rally a crowd, and tonight, she was all fire. "We're not just fighting for my flowers or Maria's tricycle," she said, her voice steady. "We're fighting for our homes, our rights," Karen thinks. "She can bully us because we've been too scared to push back. Not anymore." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, spark igniting in the eyes of people who'd felt powerless for too long. Asterisk, Sarah proposed a 3-step plan, scribbling it on a whiteboard. Step 1. Research. The HOA's bylaws were a dense, 50-page mess, but Sarah suspected Karen had been bending them to her will. "We need to know their rules better than they do," she said. She assigned Tom and Lisa, a meticulous accountant, to dig through the document for loopholes or violations Karen might have overlooked. Raj, a tech-savvy engineer, volunteered to cross-check state laws on HOAs, suspecting Karen's fines might exceed legal limits. Asterisk, Step 2. Exposure. Sarah, with her design skills, knew the power of a good story. She created a private group on X called hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels, urging everyone to post photos and stories of HOA absurdities. "Show the world what we're dealing with," she said. Within hours, the group was flooded. Maria posted a photo of her son's tricycle with the caption, $200 for this. Tom shared a snap of his too rustic mailbox, sparking a thread of likes and angry emojis. Emma, the teacher, uploaded a picture of her banned Black Lives Matter sign, writing, "This isn't about aesthetics. It's about control." The posts gained traction, with neighbors from other communities chiming in about their own HOA nightmares. By morning, hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels was trending locally with comments like, "Down with HOA tyrants," and "Fight back." Pouring in, step 3 was the boldest. A public act of defiance. Sarah called it the Garden of Defiance. On a chosen Saturday, every homeowner would plant something non-compliant. Bright flowers, quirky lawn ornaments, anything to break Karen's beige stranglehold. "We'll show her we're not afraid," Sarah said, her eyes blazing. "If we all do it together, she can't fine us all." The idea was risky. Mass violations could lead to mass fines, but the room erupted in cheers. Maria, hesitant at first, nodded fiercely. "For my son," she said. Tom grinned, already picturing a neon pink flamingo in his yard. Mr. Jenkins, clutching a photo of his wife by their rose trellis, whispered, "I'm in." Over the next week, the rebellion took shape. Tom and Lisa found a gold mine in the bylaws. Article 7. Section 4 required a 2/3 homeowner vote for new rules, something Karen hadn't done in years. Raj discovered that Ohio law capped HOA fines at $500 per violation, meaning some of Karen's $1,000 penalties were illegal. Sarah turned these findings into infographics for hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels, making the HOA's overreach crystal clear. The group grew to 50 members, nearly half the neighborhood, as more residents joined, emboldened by the online buzz. Sarah printed flyers for the Garden of Defiance, slipping them into mailboxes under cover of night to avoid Karen's spies. But not everyone was on board. Some neighbors, like Mrs. Carter, a longtime Karen ally, warned that defying the HOA could tank property values. Others feared retaliation. Karen had a reputation for targeting dissenters. At a second meeting, Sarah addressed the doubters. "Property values don't mean much if we're miserable in our own homes," she said. "This is about more than flowers. It's about who gets to decide what home means." Her words hit home, and even Mrs. Carter promised to plant a single daisy. As the Garden of Defiance approached, the neighborhood hummed with secret preparations. Sarah ordered a truckload of marigolds. Tom sourced flamingos from a novelty store, and Maria's son picked out red geraniums. The rebellion wasn't just a protest. It was a revival of community spirit. Neighbors whispering plans over fences, kids drawing protest signs with crayons. Sarah felt the weight of it all, but also the thrill. For the first time, Sunnyvale felt alive again, united by a shared cause. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake Karen's empire to its core. The morning of the Garden of Defiance dawned with a golden July glow, but the air in Sunnyvale Estates crackled with electric anticipation. At 8 a.m., Sarah stepped onto her lawn, a trowel in one hand and a tray of marigold zinnias and sunflowers in the other. She knelt in the dirt, planting each vibrant bloom with deliberate defiance, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was at the moment Sunnyvale would push back against Karen Mitchell's beige tyranny. Across the street, Mr. Jenkins, his hands trembling, but his resolve firm, erected a second rose trellis, its crimson blooms a tribute to his late wife. Maria and her son, giggling with nervous excitement, planted a riot of red geraniums in their front yard, the little boy's sneakers streaked with soil. Tom, ever the showman, staked a neon pink flamingo in his lawn, its gaudy glory a deliberate jab at the HOA's aesthetic harmony. By noon, Sunnyvale was a kaleidoscope of color lavender cosmos, orange poppies, and quirky lawn ornaments sprouted everywhere. A living rebellion against the HOA's sterile rulebook, Sarah had planned, for maximum impact. She set up her phone on a tripod, live streaming the event on YouTube, her voice steady as she narrated the scene. "This is Sunnyvale Estates, taking back our homes," she said, panning to neighbors planting flowers and waving at the camera. The stream's view count climbed 100, then 1,000. Then 5,000's hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels trended on X, comments flooded in. "Go get 'em," and "HOS are the worst." Neighbors who'd been too scared to join posted their own photos, from a gnome holding a tiny protest sign to a mailbox painted electric blue. Even Mrs. Carter, the HOA loyalist, planted a single daisy, her small act of rebellion, earning cheers from the group. Karen Mitchell, predictably, was apoplectic. By 10 a.m., she was storming the streets in her signature cardigan, her clipboard a weapon, as she scribbled violation notices with furious precision. "This is anarchy." "Oh wait," she shrieked, her face red as she confronted Sarah. "You're all in. Violation of Section 3.2, 4.1, and 7.8. You'll pay for this." Sarah, unfazed, kept the camera rolling, capturing Karen's rant for the growing online audience. "We're following our hearts, Karen," Sarah said calmly. "These are our homes, not your canvas." The neighbors, emboldened, stood their ground. Tom waved his flamingo like a flag, shouting, "Fine me for this, Karen." Maria's son, clutching a geranium, stuck out his tongue, earning a laugh from the crowd. The spectacle drew attention beyond Sunnyvale. By midday, a local news van pulled up, a reporter interviewing residents about the HOA's overreach. Maria, her voice shaking but clear, told the camera, "I'm a single mom. These fines are stealing food from my son's plate." Mr. Jenkins, holding a rose, spoke softly. "This trellis is all I have left of my wife. They can't take that from me." The reporter's story aired that evening, painting the HOA as a bully and the residents as underdog heroes. The YouTube stream hit 20,000 views, with comments from across the country. "My HOA banned my kid's swing set, and time to plant some marigolds." The viral attention turned Sunnyvale into a symbol of resistance, with hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels trending nationally. But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, she called an emergency HOA meeting, threatening legal action against the rebels, as she posted a scathing letter on the HOA website, accusing Sarah of inciting chaos and warning of severe consequences. Some neighbors wavered, fearing liens or lawsuits, but Sarah rallied them in a late-night garage meeting. "She's scared," Sarah said, holding up the bylaws. "We've got proof her rules are illegal. If we stay united, she can't win." Tom, Lisa, and Raj shared their findings. Karen's unvoted rule changes and excessive fines were indefensible. The group drafted a petition demanding Karen's resignation, with 80% of the neighborhood signing it. The Garden of Defiance wasn't just a protest. It was a transformation. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years swapped gardening tips, their laughter echoing down streets once silent with fear. Kids ran through yards, painting signs that read, "We love flowers." The community spirit, long crushed by Karen's rules, bloomed as brightly as the marigolds. Sarah, watching her neighbors unite, felt a surge of pride. This was bigger than her garden. It was about reclaiming their homes, their voices, their joy. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the rebellious lawns, Sarah knew the HOA's grip was slipping. The stage was set for a final showdown at the HOA meeting, where the residents would wield their unity like a sword. The community center was packed to the rafters for the emergency HOA meeting, the air thick with tension and the faint scent of coffee from a battered urn in the corner. Over 100 residents filled the folding chairs, their faces a mix of defiance, nervousness, and hope. Sarah stood at the front, a thick binder of bylaws in her hands, her heart racing but her resolve unshaken. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Karen Mitchell, in her signature pastel cardigan, took the podium, her expression a mix of fury and desperation. "This meeting is to address the blatant disregard for our community standards," she began, her voice sharp. "The so-called Garden of Defiance is a violation of multiple regulations, and those responsible will face severe consequences." But the room wasn't cowed. Whispers of hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels rippled through the crowd, and Sarah caught Tom's grin from the back row. Asterisk Sarah stepped forward, her binder a weapon forged in late-night research. "Karen, your rules don't hold up," she said, her voice clear and steady. She opened to Article 7, Section 4, reading aloud. "Any new rule or amendment requires a two-thirds vote from homeowners, recorded at a public meeting." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You've added dozens of rules, paint colors, flower restrictions, even dog barking limits without a single vote. That's illegal." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Karen's face paled. But Sarah wasn't done. She flipped to another page, citing Ohio law. HOA fines cannot exceed $500 per violation without court approval. Yet you fined Tom $1,000 for his dog, and Maria $2,000 cumulatively for her son's tricycle. It's not just unfair, it's against the law. Asterisk Tom stood, holding up a stack of violation notices. "I've got $3,000 in fines for my truck, my shed, my mailbox, none of it voted on." Maria, her hands trembling, added, "I'm a single mom. Your fines almost cost me my home." Mr. Jenkins, leaning on his cane, spoke softly. "You tried to take my wife's roses. You don't get to take our memories." The crowd roared, their voices a wave of pent-up frustration. Karen tried to interrupt, but Sarah held up the petition, signed by 80% of the neighborhood. "We demand your resignation, Karen, and a new board election, per the bylaws you ignored." Asterisk, the room fell silent as Karen's allies on the board shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Carter, once Karen's staunch supporter, stood. "I planted a daisy," she said quietly. "I was wrong to back you, Karen. This has gone too far." The betrayal stung, and Karen's composure cracked. "You'll regret this," she hissed, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Faced with the petition, the bylaws, and a room full of united homeowners, she had no choice. Karen resigned on the spot, storming out as the crowd cheered. Asterisk, the new board election was held that night, with Sarah elected president by a landslide. Her first act was to suspend all pending fines, earning applause that shook the walls. Over the next month, the board, now including Maria, Tom, and Lisa, rewrote the bylaws. Gone were the rules about flower colors, mailbox designs, and barking dogs. New guidelines prioritized homeowner freedom, with clear limits on fines and mandatory votes for changes. The HOA's budget, once a black hole for Karen's pet projects, was made transparent, with dues lowered to $100 a year. Sunnyvale Estates transformed overnight. Lawns bloomed with wildflowers, kids' bikes, littered driveways, and Tom's flamingo became a neighborhood mascot. Neighbors threw barbecues, their laughter echoing down streets once silenced by fear. Asterisk Sarah's YouTube video from the Garden of Defiance hit 100,000 views, inspiring homeowners nationwide. Hashtag Sunnyvale Rebels trended for weeks. Stories flooding X from people fighting their own HOAs. One woman in Texas overturned a ban on her vegetable garden. Another in Florida saved her rainbow-painted mailbox. Local news ran follow-ups calling Sunnyvale the little neighborhood that could. Sarah was invited to speak at a community forum where she shared their strategy, research, unity, and fearless defiance. HOAs work for us, not the other way around, she told the crowd. Her words met with cheers. Asterisk for Sarah. The victory was personal. Standing in her garden, now a riot of marigolds and sunflowers, she felt a weight lift. Maria's son rode his tricycle freely, no longer a violation. Mr. Jenkins tended his roses, a smile on his face. Tom, ever the rebel, added a second flamingo. Sunnyvale wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a community, alive with color and connection. Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from strangers across the country, thanking her for showing them how to fight back. "We showed them," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "This is our home, and we decide what makes it beautiful."